In this video, we're going to be going over how to scrape data from a website using Puppeteer, and we're going to be scraping Animal Crossing data. This video was inspiration from Jack Harrington, my buddy Blue Collar Coder. You can go check out his YouTube channel, and we'll also lead into a video that he's making as well that's going to take the data that I scrape from the Animal Crossing websites that we'll take a look at. And he's going to make a UI out of it, so you can search for animals and search for different creatures and see what months you can get them and so on and so forth. So go check out his site, check out his channel. He's got some good stuff on there. And in the meantime, we will just jump right into it. So first, I'll go ahead and just do the project setup stuff. We'll go ahead and create a folder, create a Git repository, and initialize this with npm. And we'll go ahead and open up a terminal in here in VS Code, and we'll start by installing Puppeteer. All right, so let's go ahead and make our entry file here. We'll just make an index.js, and in this we're going to require, we'll do Puppeteer, and we'll require Puppeteer. Okay, so now we've got Puppeteer. We can do something simple. So let's call an async, or create an async function here. And let's say this is going to get the fish in Animal Crossing, and then we'll go ahead and call that function once we run our script. So let's go ahead and declare our browser. So we've got const browser equals await, and we'll have Puppeteer dot browser, and then we'll also, let's fix this. There we go. And then we'll also declare our page here. So this is also going to be await, Puppeteer.await, page. There we go. Okay, so we have our browser and our page, and we're going to use these things to be making the calls to the page that we want. Except we do want this to be actually browser.page. There we go. Okay, so now we can go ahead and go to a page. So we can do page go to, and this is where we'll put the URL in that we care about. And we're going to be grabbing all of our data from this animalcrossing.fandom.com page. So that's going to be the page that we go to here. And one more thing, actually, this should be puppeteer.launch. Okay, so I was wrong on both of these first two lines, but we can go ahead and test this. And to close out this function, we can go ahead and close our page. And before we run this, let's make it so it's not headless. So headless means that it's going to run all this stuff without opening a window. So you're not actually going to see anything. And I guess as a little background, Puppeteer is a headless browser. So Puppeteer is basically an automated way of opening up and using Google Chrome. So we normally can do this as headless, but here we can set headless defaults. And this will make it so that it's actually going to open up so we can see it as it's performing the commands that we want it to. So let's just go ahead and run this, make sure this isn't going to break anything or we haven't made any syntax errors. And it looks like it just hangs, so we probably did make some kind of syntax error. So let's check out our code. All right, cool. So lots of issues in here in the methods that I'm calling. So it should be puppeteer.launch and then browser.new page. Okay, so once we have the new page, then hopefully it should go to it. So let's give this another try. Okay, cool. So you saw that it opened up this page. It did wait until it finished loading the page. And so that's what it was awaiting here. And once it had returned that page completion of loading, then it closed the browser. So that's a very basic version of running Puppeteer, opening a page, and then as soon as it opens and it finishes loading, then it's going to close it. So now that we're ready to actually start scraping the data, let's go ahead and declare our fish data that we're going to export here. And then we're going to assign this the value of another asynchronous function, which is going to be page.evaluate. And this function is going to, I guess we're going to pass in a function to this. And in here, this is where we're going to basically make all of our calls on the DOM. So we can actually use document dot query selector or whatever kind of DOM methods we want to run on this, we can run on it. So that's where we're actually going to be getting our data. And then once we, let's say I've done this, I'll do like const fish equals document dot query selector, whatever, and then I'll have my query in there, and then in here I could return fish or whatever it'll be. So that's kind of a rough outline of how it'll be. And you'll see that as I go through this, in order to actually evaluate and figure out what queries I want to use in here, I'm going to be looking at an like opening up my browser and going into the browser console and kind of toying with what queries I want to use in this script. A lot of browser scraping and web scraping is just trial and error and figuring out what works in the browser itself. And then once you figure out what query you want to use in the browser, then you can pop that into your script and run this automated over and over. So let's go ahead and move forward here and actually start to form the queries that we're going to use. So let's jump over here to the actual page we're going to be scraping, and we'll open up the browser console and let's go to the inspector, and we will keep our console open down here. That way I can run a bunch of queries if I want to, and then we'll check out and increase the size of this. Okay. So the data that I care about is all within here. So it's going to be all of these different animals. We want to get their name, the image. Let's get the image URL. We want the price, location, shadow size, the time, and then we've got all these months and whether they can or cannot be acquired during those months. And so probably what we'll do there is put each of these month names that have checkboxes, we'll put that into an array, and then we'll return that. We also will be joining this fish array up with, let's see, bugs and deep sea creatures. So we'll be doing those as well. And so for each of these fish, we'll also want to assign a type of fish. Okay, so let's get started by checking out what elements we want to use here. So we're going to look in this table, and this has a T body, and there's a table within it. Okay, and this has a T head. So first what we're going to do is we're going to get each of these items within this T head. These are going to be the keys for the object that we create for each fish. Okay, so we want the name, the image, price, location, shadow size, etc. And then we want months. So for this, let's do, and like I said, we're going to do a lot of trial and error here. And so let's just start playing around with the elements that we have in the DOM. So this is going to be, and what do we want to here? We want to actually query selector all. So we're going to get everything that it has. So this could be table and T head, and we want to make sure that we get just one in response. One other thing that we're going to notice here is that when we do this document.querySelector, it's going to return a node list. And for us to iterate over it, it's going to be a lot more helpful if it's an array. That way we can use core JavaScript functions like map and reduce and filter, so on and so forth. So in order to do that, we can just use the spread operator and then put it in an array. And then we can do this, and it's going to return each of these nodes as an array. So we care about the first one here, so we can just do the first one. We can probably do a query that's more specific, that's just going to get this first one if we wanted to. Like I could find out where the second one is. It's probably down here after all of our fish. And open this up. I could probably find, let's see, this has no class name. Does this one have a class? This one also has no class name. So we don't have to be really exact here for this case. I don't really care about having something that's really reproducible every time. So honestly, what I could do for this is I could just get the first one. Okay, and this is going to return all of the items in this heading and each of these is going to be within the tr. So let's add tr in here. Okay, so that table row. So it's going to return the table row. And then within this, we want to get each of these items. So each of these is going to be th, which is a table header cell. And for each of these table header cells, we want to probably get the inner text. So this one is going to return the header for us. And then within this, we want to do, we can do a query selector in this. Okay, so this is going to return another node list. So again, this is going to return a node list, and we don't really want a node list, so we're going to wrap this. So we did a spread. Again, we did the same thing where we wrapped it in an array and then did a spread operator. So it's going to spread out all of the items within that array or node list, and then it's going to put it within an actual array. Okay, so this, again, this allows us to use map and reduce and filter and other array methods on this set of data items. So now we've got each of these, and this is where we're going to actually want to use map. So each of these is going to return an HTML node for us, and probably what we want is just the inner text. So if we had here, we had node, then we could return node inner text. Okay, so we're getting closer here. So we have this array of all these things. We do have our months, which we're going to want to convert to an array of months. So we can play with that. We also want to remove these spaces, and we don't really want these to be, let's change the case of these. So we'll probably want these to be camel case. So let's play with that. So press up to get the last command that we had back. And now we can do trim here. And so that'll make it just a little bit nicer. Okay, so before we move forward, let's just grab this and we'll put it into our script. And we can start to assign variables and stuff here. So let's get rid of this thing that we had created. Put this big giant query selector query that we put in here. So let's take out this first one that we did, which is going to be right here, and we can call this header. So let's say const header equals this big query that we made here, and then within this, let's say this is going to be header items, and this is also going to be an array. So this is still giving us back text that is not camel case. So we want to convert this to camel case. So let's just honestly look at Stack Overflow. Grab that camel case function, camelize. All right, so this should return something like this array here. Hopefully these things are camel cased, which we'll still want to manipulate this. So for all the months, we want to basically find a way of telling if it's a month, which it looks like really, if we want to cheat, we could say if it has 3 letters, because it looks like all of these have 3 letters. The other ones have more than 3 letters. We can also look at the classes in here. Let's see if we can find if they have a class. What would be really nice is if each of these had a class that was like a month or something like that, because then we could make this script more maintainable, and we could check if it has a month class in it. But if it doesn't, then we can just kind of do it a little bit more hacky and a little bit more quick, and we'll just check if it has 3 letters. But that's down the road. Let's go ahead and run this script and see what we get here. We should get a log of an array that has each of those things that we're expecting. Okay, so it looks like it's hanging. So let's take a look at what we might have done wrong here. So let's try adding this page wait for 1,000 milliseconds. And then also let's go ahead, and it looks like we want to return something here. Let's just see if this makes a difference to return this fish data. And in here we can say, we'll add just a return function here. Oh, okay, so it helped to look in the actual error logs here. So it looks like camelize is not defined. So let's try this one more time. See if defining it with const will help out. All right, let's just pop it right in here. We'll kill this so that I'll close Chrome. And let's run this one more time, see if that helps out. Okay, great. So we quit away from it, but it did finish running, and it did put our strings into camel case, which is good. And it still has our months here later. So for each of these months, we can do like what I said here, where we're going to filter out just if those are 3 letters. So let's say months equals header items dot filter, and we'll have our item here, and we're going to filter if item dot length equals 3. Let's add a space in there, and now we'll have months, and these months are going to be helpful later. We'll use these basically to convert a check mark to one of these month strings. Okay, so even though we're not going to be using these specific month strings within the header and like correlating 1-to-1 here, we're basically going to be checking, is this checkbox at index 0, checkbox at index 1, checkbox at index 3, and if there is at each index, it's going to check for the month that correlates to that index, and it'll pop that month into the array. So we'll see really how that's going to shake out later, but we do actually need these month names, even though we're not going to be necessarily keeping it in this header items thing. So let's actually go ahead and return an object here, and we'll have header items, and then we'll also have our months. And then our header items, we actually don't want to have the months in there. So let's say this is going to be header items with months, and now we're going to have our header items is going to be header items with months, and now we're going to filter out. So this is going to be an item, and we're going to filter out if the item.length does not equal 3. Okay, so this should return an object with the header items, which is everything besides the months, and then also the months, which is only the months. It should pop it back into this, which we can actually just call this value for now, just while we're running through this. Let's clear this out and run it one more time. Okay, cool. So we've got our header items and we've got our months. We probably can get rid of this wait for 1000 that I kind of added in here just as I was grasping for straws, trying to figure things out. Let's run it one more time and just see if it runs a little faster. Probably did. Okay, great. So we've got our header items and we've got our months now. So let's go ahead and start digging into the data, each of the actual data points. So within here, we want to be getting each of these bits of data, and then we're going to correlate it with those header items. So those are actually going to be our keys. So our header items, we can rename this one to, this would be like animal keys or whatever, but we can keep it as that. It's not a big deal. So let's take a look at this table, and we want to be able to get an array of each of these rows here. So we inspected, and then let's see at what point we're going to get this row. So we've got body and tr. So we'll clear this out. This query is all set. We don't need this anymore. So again, we're going to do document.query selector, and we do want all because we want to get this array. And so here we can just start with a simple tbody and tr. This is probably going to give us too much. And again, we want to wrap this in an array and then use the spread operator to spread it out. So let's check this here. The first one is too high. So this doesn't even look like it's in that table. So let's see if we can figure out a way to make sure. Got it. Okay, so it looks like this TR wraps this whole table. So let's say we do this one more time, and this time let's say there's TR here. So that should eliminate some. Okay, so let's keep inspecting here. So the first one is the very first animal. That's good. Let's go to the very last one. Make sure that's the last fish that we have here. And it looks like it's not. Let's see which one is. So it looks like it's 71. So 72 through 78 should be removed. So we need to figure out how we can get rid of those. If we wanted to do it in a hacky way, we could just do like we could just slice the array and do the first 72 items, 0 through 71. But let's see if there's a better way to do this. So this actually also looks like it's outside of the table. And okay, cool. So this only returns the body with the fish that we care about. So this query selector is just going to return the first instance of that on the page. And then within this, we can do query selector all. And this one is going to be an iterable. And in here, we can just do our TRs. Okay, so it gives us a node list of 72, which is exactly what we want. And let's do our trick again, which is going to be use the spread operator and then wrap it. So now it's going to give us an array. So let's use this query and we'll pop it in here. And in here we can say fish rows. So these are the actual HTML rows in here. We'll save that, and then for each of these rows we're going to be iterating, and we can even store it in here and say fish rows equals that. Okay, so now we can use our fish rows and we're going to map over this. So for each of these rows we want to iterate over the TDs within it. So let's take a look here and find one of these. So we've got this saw shark. So it's got a row, and then it has these table cells within it. And for each one of these, we want to convert this to text. So this is actually where we're going to change this. Each row is going to be its own object. So here we want to use reduce. Okay, so we're going to be reduce, and we'll pass it a function and then an object, an empty object to start. And this is going to have, this empty object is going to be the object that's the result of it. And so that's going to be, really this is going to be the result or the accumulator. That's what it says in the Mozilla Developer Network's documentation. But we can say that this is like the fish data. This is like the individual fish, okay? And then this is going to be the TD that we're parsing. Oh, excuse me, this is going to be the TR that we are parsing. And then the next would be the index. We don't need the index, okay? So within here, we could do TR query selector and query selector all. And in here, we're going to get our TDs. And then for each of these, so this is kind of tricky nesting of stuff here. So let's actually create this line of code in here. That way it's easier to see. So I'll have these fish rows dot reduce, and then within this we'll have a function. I'm going to return an object that has fish data, and it also has the stuff that we're going to get from this individual TD here. So let's also convert this to an array, because this is going to give us a node list again. And then we'll just iterate over each of these. Again, we want the index for 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so for each of those, we're going to be assigning this to, let's say, this fish. So I actually can convert this to a map. And that's going to be the tr and the I. And we don't need this now. And then here we're going to just return this fish. Okay, get rid of that. All right, and then here is where we can use the reduce here. So we can say this fish. Okay, so we have a fish data, our TD, and then the index. This is where we're going to use reduce. So if I is smaller than 6, this is where we want to get the header item that correlates with this row. Okay, so we'll have our header key, and that header key is going to be equal to header items at I. Okay, so this should be the index that correlates with this fish data item that we're going through. We're going to get that off of header data items. And then we're going to say fish data at the header key. And that's going to equal, this is where we're actually going to use this TD. And we'll say it's probably just going to be inner text. So let's go with that. And if it's not, if I is 6 or larger, that means it's going to be one of the months. So that's where we're going to say, let's assign this a value first of all. And we actually do know that for each object we're going to make with our fish data, we're going to have this month's key. And this month's key is going to have an empty array. So let's initialize it with that. Save that. And then if it's not, and in here we want to return our fish data with the new key assigned to this inner text. And otherwise, we're going to check if the inner text is a text box or a checkbox. And if it is, td.innerText, it's actually not a function, so let's catch an error there. So if this equals to, if it equals that check mark, that's where we're going to say fish data dot months, and we're going to push on months at the index. Okay, and then we'll return it. Okay, that was a lot of code that we just wrote, but let's run this and see where we error out here. Okay, cool. So it did give us the name, the image. We need to do the image. It gets the right price, the location, shadow size, time, and for each of these in here, it should be all of the months, right? And it's returning null for some of them. Let's see why that might be. Looks like looking through this, that's the case for all of the other months that we have here. So somehow the first 6 items of months is actually not being gotcha. So the issue here is that the I here is much larger than the I here. So because this is actually starting with 6, when we look here, this I is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So here it would be 6, and it would be getting July, basically. So we want it to be 6 less, so this should actually be I minus 6. And once we do this, then we should be able to run it again, and now we'll get all of the months in here. So it was really just an index error that we had there. Okay, great. So now we have January, February, March. We have all the months that we want. We do want to check now for the image. So if it's the image, then we want to do something differently here. So the image is going to be the second one. we kind of can bank on that. So let's use that and just kind of cheat that way. A lot of web scraping is honestly cheating. Web scraping is kind of hacky anyway. It's not using an API. It's just kind of going with what you have from a website. So let's just go with what we got. So this will be the TD, and then within that we can use a query selector for the image, and from that we can get the source. So right here we can say if I equals 1, and then here we can say else. We can pop this one in here and copy it up also. And if I equals 1, this is where we're going to have the image. So this header key is really going to be image every time, but we can just keep it like that. And here we can have a query selector for an image. And then within that, we can say it's the source. I think that's going to be right here, but let's run this just to see how it turns out. Okay, great. So it is giving us the right image here. Our months are good. Our price is good. Everything else is good. So that is how we get all of the fish. Okay, so that's returning all the fish for us. We should be able to basically use that same script and open up the bugs page and then open up the deep sea creatures page and just copy that same exact thing. So let's take a look at how we'll go ahead and open a page. We'll do this in order. So we'll do fish and then bugs and then deep sea creatures. So let's actually call get all animal data, and within this we can make this an async function, and then within here we can say const fish data equals await get fish, and then we can say bugs data. Okay, so we'll call all these functions, and then each of these should return an array of those animals. Let's fix the spelling on this. Deep sea creatures. Cool. And then we'll just return an array, and we can also call then here. So let's do kind of the same thing that we had here. And we're going to drop this down, pop that over. Okay, cool. So this will give us all of our animals. And eventually we'll want to write this to a file. That way it's really easy for us to consume. Okay, cool. So we have this. Now we need to do our get bugs and get deep sea creatures. We actually might use the same thing here, but let's see what we can reuse and what we can't. If we wanted to, we could just copy paste and then change this URL, but I think we can do a little bit better than that. So let's go with that. What we can do is we can say change this to get animals. And then here we have our animal type. And this animal type could either be fish. And what we're going to do here is we'll have the animal path. And this is where we're going to store the final piece of the URL. So we're going to filter here, or we're going to make if else for each of these. Okay, and then we can change each of these calls to still be get animals. And this is going to be our fish. This is going to be our bugs. And this is going to be our deep sea creatures, if I can spell that right. Okay, now what we want to do here, this is still going to say all fish data. That's no big deal. Because we know the type of animal that it is, we want to include that in each, in all of our all fish data. So we can also say in here, we can have animal type, and that's going to be equal to animal type. So if it's passing in fish, then this should store that in here. If it's passing in bugs, then it should do that. And if it's passing in deep sea creatures, let's actually say here, this is going to be bug. And this is going to be deep sea creature. And we can do the same thing here. Fish, bug, deep sea creature. Okay. So now for each of these, we should be able to just run this function each time. That being said, do we want to close the browser each time? There might be a faster way, but let's just go ahead with this. Let's try this. We'll run it and see how this works. Okay, so it does look like it failed. Let's check out what our error was here. Okay, so it does say animal type was not defined. Rather than dealing with scope here, we can say we can return all fish data. Now for each one of these, we can just add that as the animal type. Okay, so this should have animal type in scope. So let's give this one more shot. We'll see how this goes. All right, so just took a little walk, and I think I had some inspiration while I was on my walk. I think what we're gonna do here is, instead of adding the animal type in here, we're actually gonna add it down here. Like I said, you can kind of just make stuff work. So that's what I'm gonna do right now, and then I'll refactor and clean stuff up later, but let's just make it work for now. So we'll do fish data 1, and in here we're gonna return fish animal type, and then we can really do the same thing for the other 2. So here we can do, okay, cool. So now we can clean up this stuff. So let's see if this helped out. They should build correctly, but let's see what we got. Okay, so it is closing the browser every time. Looks like it completed successfully. Now what we'll want to do to make sure this is correct and to make it as clean as possible, or to make it so it's actually usable, is we'll want to write this to a file. Before we do that, let's just check the length of each of these just to make sure that it's like remotely close to what it should be. So our scraping is done now. So let's go ahead and const fs equals require fs.write, and say json.stringify, .stringify and animals. So I was close. So it's fs.write file. That would be why it wasn't doing autocomplete for me. And then here, this is going to be the name of the file that I want. And then I could also have a callback here. And let's just say that we're done here. And so we should see a new file being created here once we run this. Okay, so now we see this animals.json file. So we see we've got our months that are good. Everything looks good until at a certain point. And we have this undefined, has a checkbox here. So it looks like somehow the parsing of our months is messed up, for deep sea creatures at least. So let's see if this is the case for any other types of animals. Let's check we have our bug, same thing, we have undefined. Let's check our fish as well, see if we're getting undefined there. For fish, we do not have undefined. So this might be because of the way that the table is shaped for those. So for bugs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it actually only has 5 columns here first. And probably deep sea creatures also has only 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the one column that fish has that deep sea creatures doesn't, name, image, price, shadow, size, time. So that means our months are going to be messed up. Name, image, price, location. So it also has a location, which is going to be either river or waterfall or pond. So let's see how we can get rid of that location. So it looks like time is always going to be the last header item of the non-months. So here we have time. If we look at bugs, we'll also have time. And here we have time. So we can check the ID of this time within header months. So here it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then in fish, it's going to be 5. So this number is actually going to be the index of time plus 1. So let's say our length of non-months, or this would be like the month start index. And that's going to be, let's see, we can check header items and we can look for index of where it has time. And then we'll add 1. So let's give that a run through and see if it works. We'll clear this out just in case, although it should override it anyway. Okay, and we'll check out the file one more time. For our fish, we're good with our time. Let's see down here. It looks like we don't have this undefined anymore. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. And then there's a null. So it looks like in our months, we're still getting an issue with our months themselves. So let's jump back into here where we're assigning the month. So we still have this 6 here. So this 6 should be our month start index again. Okay. So let's clear out our animals one more time, and this might be the one where we have all of the data that we want in just the right position that we want it. Okay, and let's check out our animals JSON. So we are getting the right months for the fish, just like we were before. Let's pop all the way down to the bottom. It looks like we're now getting everything through December. So let's just do a quick search for undefined, make sure we don't find any of that. So there's no undefined, and we could paste through all of this just to make sure that everything is good. But everything does look pretty good, just like we're expecting. Months, name, image, price, shadow size, time, animal type. For our animals that are of animal type fish, they should have location as well. So if we jump up to fish, then it has location river. River, probably one is pond or lake or whatever else they have. But I think that gives us all the data that we need in the format that we were kind of expecting and in the format that we want, and the format that I'm going to hand over to Jack for him to do, to basically take all this data and put it into a UI that can be searchable so that people can see what month it is or what price they need to buy an animal for and just search through the animals like that. So I'm going to hand it over to Jack for that, and I'll show a quick preview of what his finished product of his UI is going to look like. But make sure to jump over to his channel, check out the link in the description that I'll include that will have his video where he's going to go ahead and build the UI for this, and he's going to take in this data that we've scraped from these websites here. But yeah, definitely give that a look, and he's going to walk through all of his process for that. But thanks for watching this video. I hope you've learned a little bit about Puppeteer and web scraping in general, and traversing the DOM and how to manipulate those objects and arrays that you're getting back from that. And we'll see you in the next video.